On housing, you talked in your address last night about housing.
Yeah.
Are you still considering a national emergency over housing?
I'm looking at it.
What would that look like? What would that mobilize?
You know, there's two thoughts on housing. You have a lot of people have housing that because we have such a strong time and such a strong market, their houses are very valuable. It's a big part of their net worth, their house. I don't want to knock those numbers down because I want them to continue to have a big value for their house. At the same time, I want to make it possible for young people out there and other people to buy housing. In a way, they're at conflict. In other words, you create a lot of housing all of a sudden and it drives the housing prices down. So I want to take care of the people that have houses that have a value to their house that they never thought possible, that have sort of made them wealthy and happy, and especially in their later years. Got to be careful with that. I want to keep them up. At the same time, I want to make it possible for people to go buy houses. Daniel, please.
Trump will not hesitate to defend those who already have wealth, who already have power, who already own the means of production. That is why he gave this two-faced answer as he usually does. He plans to do jack shit for housing, as you can tell by the ending of his statement there, where he said, oh yeah, and I want to help people buy housing too. Next question. No details on how he's going to do that or when he's going to do that or what his plan is or anything like that. It's the same reason there is still, after almost 10 years, no Trump healthcare plan. It's because he doesn't care. If you're not already rich and powerful, he does not care about you. I don't know how many times we need to watch Trump do things or fail to do things or say things that provide evidence for that fact. It's been 10 years now, and we've seen him over and over again. He's not fighting for you. He's fighting for the elites. Look at the Epstein files. Look at they're supposed to be redacting the names of victims. Who are they redacting? They're redacting the names of the elites. They're protecting the perpetrators. It's all a defense of the elites, and Trump is their guy. Now, 4 days after he made that statement, Trump posted this on Truth Social. New home prices dropped by 27% for Lennar Homes. Lennar is one of the big home construction builders in the US. So why is Trump bragging about prices coming down when in that speech, in that question to the reporters, he said that he wanted to protect people's home prices? So which is it? Does he want to protect home prices or does he want to build more housing? This chart he's posting is showing house prices coming down. So once again, this is Trump speaking out of both sides of his mouth. He wants to appease everybody because he's a malignant, pathological liar. So he's going to say whatever the popular thing is to say, but when you watch him, he does not do the popular thing. That's why he's invading cities with the National Guard, which nobody asked for. The same thing applies here with this housing prices scam. The reporter asked him a very good question, I thought, like, hey, are you going to do anything about the housing crisis in America? And obviously Trump wasn't quite prepared for that answer, but in a way, he's always prepared for an answer because he always speaks out of both sides of his mouth. And one more thing I want to show you guys is I found this quite funny on X, a response to Trump's answer that he gave in that question. Someone posted, pick your fighter, and there's a picture of Xi Jinping. And a quote from him saying, houses are for living in, not for speculation. So it's just funny that we're now looking to the Communist Party of China as like leaders in how to combat the housing crisis and how to deal with the housing crisis. I think that was just a funny tongue-in-cheek thing. But there's some truth to that, Mike, what do you think of Trump's two-sided answer where he wants to both supposedly allow young people to afford houses and he wants to protect his rich friends? How do you square those two things together?
I think it's just another classic case of Trump speaking out of both sides of his mouth. He promises both sides what they want, and then he doesn't really accept responsibility for either outcome. And if anything, he'll likely blame, like if it goes wrong, he'll blame the people who wanted it in the first place instead of taking responsibility for making the decision, leadership. I do think that it is interesting that Trump says the quiet part out loud in this clip where he specifically says, I want to bring the housing down because if I lower the price, then like it'll make everything much more affordable. But I don't want to like hurt other people's investments and blah blah blah. And it's just like, so he's admitting like he could make housing much more affordable, but he's choosing not to. But then he seems to kind of, straddle the fence. And I think you brought up a great point, Emmanuel, about how he doesn't provide any details at all for what he wants to do for a plan. This is also not new at all with Trump. I mean, if we look at like his healthcare proposals, for example, they always talk about cutting Obamacare and getting rid of Obamacare, yet there is zero plan for what's going to replace it. And so the stuff with housing is no different. He doesn't seem to have any sort of plan. If he did have a plan, he would be out there talking about it. He would probably have some sort of slogan or catchphrase, and he'd be citing it at his rallies and everything, and talking about how I'm going to make everything more affordable for you and blah, blah, blah. And like, I'm no economist. I'm no housing expert. I don't know what I'm talking about here, but it is very interesting to me that like there is such extreme reluctance to do this. At least in like the way that I would view it is, you could probably take like some city somewhere, decide on a city, and make that kind of like your pilot program where you introduce this. So that way you're not jeopardizing homes across the nation. You could start small, monitor it, make sure that it works, and then do some fine tuning, and then spread that program elsewhere. So I don't see why we can't even explore this. Why is it not even an option to discuss the possibilities of it? I mean, clearly he is discussing the possibility of it here, and he says he's going to look into it, but he's much more invested in his ballroom. He's much more invested in golf. He's much more invested in, all kinds of things that have nothing to do with actually leading. The man does not like to lead. He does not like the responsibility. He just wants the credit. That's it. And so I do think that it's also noteworthy that he was asked about whether or not he would declare a national emergency for housing, because that's how bad our homelessness is. Now, maybe that's a term that he brought up, of saying he was going to declare it a national emergency, and then people are asking him about it. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if, we do need a national emergency for it, because homelessness is pretty crazy, especially in certain cities. Like, it can get wild, like Austin or San Francisco and things like that. But I also think that it's very interesting that if you look at how the homeless were treated in DC when the National Guard came in, Trump literally gave the order to clear the streets. So you have lots of videos out there of people recording, the National Guard and federal agents coming in and literally just taking and destroying everything that these homeless people have. They're packing up their tents. They're throwing them in trash trucks. And it's just like, these are people with nothing. They have a shopping cart and a tent and maybe some like bags of stuff. That's all they have. That's all they have. And he's just going around taking it from them, throwing it in the trash, and telling them either like go somewhere else and find somewhere else to live, or you go to jail. So this doesn't seem like and some of these people are even veterans, So all of this goes against the narrative of, oh, I'm here to help the homeless. I'm here to help the less fortunate, because that's not what his actions show at all. So it'll be interesting to see what develops, but I'm personally not holding my breath.
Homelessness is a part of capitalism. And this is something that Karl Marx told us about almost 200 years ago, and he was right. He predicted everything that's coming to fruition. I mentioned rent-seeking at the outset. Homelessness and poverty is an essential component of capitalism, because capitalism requires the exploitation of others in order to enrich the other side. So you have your top 20% living in luxury and palaces and yachts and, servants and what have you. And then you have your bottom 20 creeping up to 50% living on the streets. And that lower end of the spectrum only grows over time. And we're seeing that now in the late stage capitalism state that we're at. So it's not like we didn't know about this. It's not like we didn't see this coming. We just chose to ignore it because capitalism and stock market, yay, number go up and to the right. And we all get excited about that. Look, Trump's message here was just a typical Trump response. He doesn't care about the homelessness situation. He doesn't care about the housing situation. As long as his buddies and his enablers and his donors are okay, he's fine. He knows he doesn't have to do anything else. And that's the bottom line.